All right, everybody, welcome in to Sports and Money. I am Benjamin Parker. Simon Short is on board with us today. We are covering the Steelers draft again tonight on a number of different fronts, both in detail with some of the players and then the Steelers moving forward and some of the spinoffs of that as well. Simon, how you doing tonight, man?
Good, Ben. I'm ready, man. I'm still excited. I'm still jacked from the draft. I don't know about you. I think I'm over it, and then I read something or look up something and I get excited all over again. So happy to do this with you.
It was an excellent draft. No matter whether you had a favorite team or not, if you just like good television and watching backroom deals get done and then come out to where we can all see what happened, it was a fantastic draft. I know the Chiefs for sure did a ton of that on my end. The Steelers didn't do as much of that maybe in the first round, but they had some other things they were trying to work on in later rounds. So let's get started, man. Kenny Pickett, number 20 overall, surprised the heck out of everybody. Maybe not so much that Pickett went 20 to the Steelers. We had seen some people talk about that. But the fact that Malik Willis zooms down the draft board right past the Steelers and literally everybody else in the NFL, hit us up real quick with, before we hit Pickett, how surprised you were to watch Malik Willis go, and maybe how surprised you were that Pittsburgh didn't seem too interested in him.
Yeah, so when it comes to Malik Willis, I think in the moment, yeah, it was really surprising. That was the guy that there were breadcrumbs all over the place in terms of, Tomlin's attention to him at the Senior Bowl and at the Pro Day, and they were at, Kenny Pickett stuff and talking to him, and they did that with all the quarterbacks. But I think it definitely just looked and felt like, okay, Malik is the guy. Now I think what has come out since the draft has happened was the Steelers didn't believe that Kenny Pickett would fall to them at 20 at all. They thought there was just no chance. They were so sure that guy would be a top 10 pick. So I think, it is kind of, they couldn't get the Ferrari, so they fell in love with the Mazda, right? Or whatever. I don't need to call Malik Willis a Mazda, but you get my point. Like, they just thought, okay, Kenny Pickett's not going to be there. We know him. We don't have to, get too enamored with him in the pre-draft. Let's look at these other guys. We really like Malik Willis. That's what I think happened. And then, they got on the board at 20 and they said, oh my God, this guy is still here. Let's go get him.
It's fascinating. I think for years to come, we'll be talking about this Malik Willis slide, or we'll be talking about Pickett at 20. And who really knows, for good or bad, with either of these guys. But I think we're going to be talking about both of these guys for years to come. All right, let's settle in on Kenny Pickett for a second then. He's here, for better or worse. What do you think the Steelers, does he start day one? Does he bite off three-way position for this job? Do they kind of keep him on the back burner until midway through the season? How do you see him pushing forward right now for the Steelers?
I think where we stand right now, which is still May 5th, is it's a three-way tie at this moment. I think in the heart of hearts, even for Tomlin and Colbert and offensive coordinator Matt Canada, they know Mason Rudolph is further behind than Trubisky and Pickett. They know he's kind of the number three, but they're going to give him every opportunity. Those guys, all they care about is competition and what guys look like on the field. So they're going to give all three of those guys the opportunity. Mason Rudolph's opportunity might come more in the way of, hey, one of those two guys has to screw up for me to show what I've got a little bit more, because they know who he is. When they get into training camp and they have the four quarterbacks on the roster, the way they usually distribute their reps is, okay, the starter, maybe the new guy we don't know as much, and then the guy we know, he'll do two or three passes in a drill at a time, kind of thing. That's going to be Mason Rudolph. They're going to want to learn about Pickett and Trubisky. So those guys are going to get a lot of reps early on in training camp. But all three are going to have the opportunity. And then it'll just be about who separates themselves for better or worse. If Pickett's keeping up and not, falling behind Trubisky in any sort of way, because really the only way he could do that is if he's struggling with the pro game and the pro speed. If he goes into training camp and is running drills and he's getting picked off left and right in some pretty easy drills, just adjusting to the speed of the game, then I think they're going to be perfectly happy to let Trubisky start for however long it needs to be, 4 games, 8 games, 17 games, whatever it is. I think anything is on the table at this point, which also includes, if all else is equal, they'll probably start Kenny Pickett.
It's fascinating. You don't usually have three guys on the roster who might actually have a chance to start. And I assume that the confidence in Mason Rudolph is probably very low, considering that you signed a guy and drafted a guy, but
Yeah.
still, yeah, he's going to be given a chance, I assume. Now, you mentioned in your video earlier and tonight they'll have the fourth quarterback because they also drafted in the seventh round Chris Oladukin from South Dakota State. Just real quickly, we won't dive into him too much, but why do the Steelers like to have four guys on the roster at quarterback moving through the off season? Give us just a little bit on that.
Yeah, the Steelers are all about just like covering their bases. That's why they go into every draft with every spot on the roster kind of filled. They don't like to have any holes. They don't like to be put, in a position where they're caught with their pants down, so to speak. So they want to go in with four quarterbacks because they always want to have three quarterbacks on the roster when it comes down to making a 53-man roster. So if they have four quarterbacks all through the summer, all through training camp, all through preseason, then that means they're protected all the way up until it comes time to just put the three on the roster. And in a lot of cases, when that fourth guy is practice squad eligible, which I don't even know what that means anymore based on, the COVID restrictions and things. I know that's been loosened up, but I don't know if that's still the case. But if that fourth guy is eligible for the practice squad and can just go on there, they're perfectly happy with that. But these things always have a funny way of shaking themselves out. So they just like to have that insurance. Plus, it's another young guy with, Mason Rudolph is on the last year of his deal. Mitch Trubisky is on a team-friendly 2-year deal that would be pretty easy to get out of after 1 year. So if they spend a seventh-round pick and happen to get, let's say, their career number 2 behind Pickett for 4 or 5 years or whatever, that's a home run.
We could talk about the quarterbacks all night, but I want to move on to the next person here, George Pickens at number 52. How surprised were you that Pickens was still there at 52? And then how surprised were you that the Steelers actually took him? Tell us a little bit about Pickens and your emotions right there at number 52.
I was ecstatic once it got to 52 and he was still there. I was not surprised at all. I honestly wouldn't have been surprised had they taken him in the first round. He was actually on my first round big board for the Steelers,
Right.
just based on those connections, like you mentioned. So he went to Georgia, obviously big Power Five school, which the Steelers love. Tomlin and Colbert were at his pro day, so they were very familiar with him. Wide receiver coach Frisman Jackson was also at his pro day and put him through workout drills. So that gave him, Jackson, an opportunity to get familiar with Pickens as well, see what he could bring to the room. So then it was just a matter of, where is he going to be? Is he going to be there? Because all the signs pointed to him being a fit. They also love the underclassmen if they can get them. They like having them be a little bit younger when they have the opportunity in terms of when it comes time to give them a second contract. It's a lot more fun to give that to a 25-year-old than a 27-year-old. And they also just like what that means in terms of their progression, what they think they can do as they continue to learn and get better. So all the signs were there if he was going to be there, whether it was at 20 or 52. I'm surprised he lasted all the way to 52, considering the back half of the first round, how needy receiver or how wide receiver needy all those teams were. But, he made it. And with some of I know people are talking about maybe some character issues or maturity issues, but it's not anything major. It's just like on-field antics, and those things can, be worked out if the player wants it to be worked out. But if the production at least can outweigh it, then it's worth it.
That was my feeling too. A lot of the red flags, quote unquote, that we saw for George Pickens, it really just seems to be that he's kind of a character, and I think he likes to show off a little bit, to be honest. Is he going to get you a flag at some point? Yes, probably. Doing something stupid? Yes, probably. But I mean, if the talent is there, and by the way, the pressure's not on him because of who else you got in the wide receiver room. So just staying on Pickens for a second, I I really had no problem if somebody had taken him in the first round because I'm seeing what you just said. He just seems like he likes to have a good time on the football field, and when he's up, he kind of likes to talk about it a little bit, right?
And it's because the things he does comes from an essence of competitiveness and a little bit of arrogance, and that's what you want in a football player. It's not that he's so calm that when someone pushes him, he gets mad and he fights them. No, he goes and he attacks. I mean, that fight against Georgia Tech, that's because he was putting that dude on his butt and showing off on him the whole game. And that's what you want. That's kind of what you have to do. Whether you're a receiver or on the other side as a corner, you kind of have to be that kind of player. And he does that. And this whole time we've just been talking about him as a, dude and as a prospect, but as a player, that guy is going to bring something that the Steelers need in terms of being a long, fast downfield threat that can get open, be a good route runner, get separation. He's going to bring the Steelers a lot of different aspects to their wide receiver room that they don't currently have, which means he's going to be a great fit. Like you said, those more high profile names, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, those guys have their roles kind of built into the team already. So Pickens can just slide right in and do what's needed. And then as those guys come up for second contracts, they know they have Pickens there who can, potentially fill in as an X receiver, potentially fill in as the Z jump ball guy. So whatever the team needs, I think he's going to be able to handle both from a skill level and a, person level.
The George Pickens pick I love at number 52. When we get down to the third round, and we're still in the top 100 players, to me, I didn't feel like this year's draft, if you just looked at, say, the top 100, I didn't feel like it was as deep as some years. I felt like there was good depth at certain positions. Yep. But again, you're not talking top of the line guys. You're talking this guy might be a solid starter in year two kind of guys. So tell us about DeMarvin Leal, a guy who a lot of us maybe haven't spent as much time watching, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. Tell us about him and where the Steelers might think about using him.
Yeah. So DeMarvin Leal is a defensive lineman. He's a bit of a tweener. He's played at a few different weights, but he's about 6'3". Right now, he came into the combine at about 283, 285, somewhere in that range. I think he's played a little bit heavier in the past, which is good for the Steelers. Normally, their defensive ends are at least 300 pounds, just in terms of being able to set a good edge. But what I think he's going to bring to the team, at least right away, especially if Stephon Tuitt does play this season, is he's going to be a rotational pass rusher in the sub package. Because if there's one thing he can do, it's rush the passer. And he can do that from anywhere on the line. And it's because he has a great first step. It's because he really explodes off the line of scrimmage. It's because he's good with his hands, trying to penetrate. So right now, he's not a great run defender, which is tough for Pittsburgh and not really on paper a great fit when it comes to being a Steelers, front seven player, especially when the team's run defense was so bad last year. So he's not going to help you there, but the way he's going to help is you can put him in there on third down for Cam Hayward, which is a big deal because bringing Cam Hayward off the field is a big deal. But if it means Cam is a little bit healthier in the long run, if it means he has a little bit more energy to stop the run on first downs, because you have a productive pass rusher that can rotate in on the third downs, then in the long run, that might help the run defense. Maybe there wasn't a guy when it came to the third round for them that, hey, there's no defensive lineman on here that's going to really help us be a good run defender. Nobody on here is a great run defender at this position. So let's just get a guy that's a good pass rusher, get Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt some more time to sit, and then be rested a little more for the rundowns. So that's what he's going to be. He's going to come in sub package. He's going to play a little more to the interior than, a true 3-4 defensive end as a 4-eye 5 tech. And he's going to rush the passer, and I think he'll be pretty productive as a rookie.
I really like that for this reason. It's hard to find guys who can get to the quarterback once you get outside the top 20 picks in the draft. You can find guys who can do it in college, but doing it in the NFL is almost a whole different story. I'm not sure that anything changes more in the NFL other than speed of the game than trying to get the quarterback in college versus trying to do it in the NFL. It is so completely different the way NFL teams handle these edge rushers and just how good some of these offensive linemen are in general. So finding a guy who, at least in theory, can come in on third down and start to get some pressure on, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 8, that kind of a deal. I really like that here in the third round. It's hard to get. That's a hard attribute to get anywhere outside the top 20 picks. And I also like what you just mentioned about giving those defensive linemen a rest. There's really no reason that a defensive lineman, no matter how good he is, needs to be playing 1,000 snaps a year, or God forbid, 1,200 snaps a year.
Mm-hmm.
That 800 range is fine, and we get it. You'd like to keep these guys in the field, but that rest and that lessening of the injury factor throughout the season or throughout a given game, I think it's very important. So I really like everything you just mentioned there about Marvin Leal. And again, we've got to see what he can do on the football field for sure. But in theory, that makes a lot of sense here in the late third round. Fourth round, Calvin Austin, wide receiver from Memphis. We will get more into him on another video. I'll talk more about the wide receiver room. I really can't wait to get in the wide receiver room on our next video. But just let's focus on Calvin Austin right now. Fourth round pick. This is a place where it's really not unusual to find some of these receivers who you think can be an asset to the team. Pittsburgh finds one right here. Tell us about Calvin Austin from Memphis.
I'm really pleasantly surprised by the Calvin Austin pick. He was not a guy that I had linked to the Steelers at all, other than the fact that he went to Memphis, where they've, traditionally done some drafting from before. I think he's currently the fourth Memphis guy that's on the roster currently right now. But they didn't really show any serious pre-draft interest. I mean, he was at the Senior Bowl, but they didn't send anyone significant at his pro day. But really, really excited. This is a dynamic speedster, ran a 4.32 40. Can play in the slot or on the outside. I think it was his sophomore year, his first year as a starter. He played primarily in the slot, and then as he became a bigger part of the offense, moved more toward the outside, which is really promising, because my first worry when it came to drafting a receiver that's 5'7", 5'8", 175, 180 pounds, when it comes to the Steelers, it is, oh my gosh, they're just going to keep this guy close to the line of scrimmage. They're just going to run bubble screens. They're just going to run end arounds, which is a nice dynamic part of the offense they haven't had in a while. But they need to utilize this guy as a downfield threat, because he can be that. Now, I think he did that enough in college that they will do that. And if you draft a guy in the fourth round, I would hope, at least, and in most cases, that's still a guy that should be competing for a real role in a year or two. So as long as they use his dynamic speed north and south just as much as they do east and west, I'll be really happy, because I think this is a guy that, even though he will probably be in the slot just because of his size, he can still stretch the field from that position. So as long as they're still doing that with him, I think it's going to be a great pick. Now, if they drafted him and they're only going to use him on end arounds and screens and drag routes, then I think that'll be kind of a waste. But I have high hopes that, because of all of this experience playing on the outside, they will take advantage of that.
I didn't prep you for this. We didn't do a pre-production meeting on this question I'm about to ask you. But it's actually not unusual that we see certain NFL teams draft more often from certain universities and colleges. And I'm not going to take the time to list them, but that's not an unusual trend. We all spend so much time analyzing the heck out of these players. And in the first round, I think that holds up. But a lot of times when you get down to these third, fourth, fifth round picks, I think sometimes we start to see this the past few years in the NFL, connections you have to a certain school, your trust in a certain coach to develop players a certain way, the relationship you might have had with the coach on some previous lifetime in your coaching football experience. I think it starts to come into play here. And I don't want to ask you specifically about the Calvin Austin pick, but in general, do you think the Steelers have that somewhat with the University of Memphis, and do other NFL teams seem to have that a lot as well? Just those relationships that are affecting some of these picks.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the Steelers, I just pulled up their roster from last year and just sorted it by college. 4 guys from Alabama, 2 guys from Maryland, 2 guys from Memphis. Oh my gosh, 4 guys from Michigan, 2 from Michigan State. So yeah, they definitely do. I mean, the Steelers are big time Michigan, Maryland, and then anybody in the SEC, really. I know the Ravens, they have a streak of every year they draft somebody from Alabama kind of deal, because they have some coaching connections to there, I believe. Yeah, I mean, it's just like everything else, and that it's part of the issue about the NFL, but it's also what makes kind of our jobs easier when it comes to predicting where players are going to go. Um, and it's you're a coach, you're a GM, you're a scout, and you go on the pro day trail, and you meet another. You meet the offensive line coach from this one school, and you guys become buddies, and you learn a lot about his players through him, and you end up taking, you go back to your GM and you always have the Arkansas linemen. You always have to low down on them, and that's who you're familiar with. So that's how you always draft an Arkansas lineman. That kind of deal. I believe the Memphis connection is former offensive coordinator, went to Memphis or was a coach at Memphis. Not Bruce Arians, after him. But anyways, and so you just know the program, the boosters there, the new coaches, whatever, and it's definitely how it goes. It's a familiarity game with all of these guys.
And that's fascinating. That's one reason we have you on here to talk about this kind of stuff. One more pick here, and we'll close down this video for the night. Connor Hayward, the fullback out of the 6th round. I know you like him a lot. And Mark Robinson, from linebacker from Ole Miss, also got drafted in the 7th round, but I'll let you maybe mention him real quick at the end too. But Connor Hayward, fullback. I know you like him. I know why you like him. Tell everybody else why you like Connor Hayward.
I mean, obviously, let's get the bloodlines out of the way. Cameron Hayward's little brother is coming to town. Unfortunately for Connor, that's all they wanted to talk about when he got drafted. I kind of felt bad for him. He has to do his interview with Big Brother sitting there on mom's front porch. But Connor Hayward is more than Cam Hayward's brother. That guy is a football player. He's going to be a stud. And I think, well, first off, the Steelers, when it comes to late day 3 picks, the idea is you're going to be a special teamer, and you better bring legitimate special team value, not just, oh, you couldn't hack it on offense, so we put you on special teams. Connor Hayward is 6 foot, 230 pounds, runs like crazy, and is a football player. He's going to go and make some big plays on special teams, and should be a core special teamer in terms of all 4 phases. Outside of that, this guy was recruited to Michigan State as a running back at his size. He was a legitimate running back for the first 2-3 years he was there. Kenneth Walker III, who was just drafted in the 2nd round, transferred to Michigan State during Connor Hayward's senior season this past year. And so they were like, we still need to put Hayward on the field, but he's not as good a running back as Kenneth Walker. And they just made him a tight end. And he was just like, all right, cool, I'm a tight end now. He's not going to be a baseline tight end for the Steelers. He's not blocking any defensive ends at his size. But this guy has natural hands. He's a natural route runner. They ran him a lot on like little tight end screens and stuff like that. So he's going to be an H-back, a classic H-back, where he's going to line up a step off of the line of scrimmage. He's going to line up as a fullback sometimes. I honestly think they could put him in there at 3rd down as the lone halfback with whoever the quarterback is, and let him run some screens and some delayed kind of routes and wheel routes, stuff like that. Because he's just a football player. Throw him the ball, he's going to catch it. He's going to make a play. And I think in a Matt Canada offense, that's very college styled with a lot of motions and a lot of, dump offs and stuff like that. He's a perfect fit.
We could talk about this all night, but I do want to focus on that for just a minute. Connor Hayward here is part of a group that's in the NFL. I don't know how long this has been, what percentage it's been like this. 10 to 15% of all rosters, the bottom end of the rosters, are basically guys who have latched onto the team through special teams. And unless you're a diehard fan who just loves studying special teams, most of these NFLers, this bottom 10 to 15%, are guys most of us have never heard of. They might play for 8 years in the NFL, make a heck of a lot of money, and nobody's ever heard of them. But, if you're a guy out there and you're trying to make the NFL, but your talent is a little on the suspect side, you can have a long career just being nothing but a special teamer. You got to be strong. You got to be focused. You got to work hard. You've got to be willing to do anything the team asks you. But there's a spot for guys like this in the NFL. Even if you take his fullback, H-back abilities to the side, even if that's all he did, there's a lot of guys who make a good living in the NFL doing nothing but special teams for 5 years, 8 years.
Steelers have another one on the roster right now, Derek Watt. I mean, it's funny because, of course, it's another brother, and but he's been in the NFL for 6 years, and he's listed as a fullback, but he's nothing special on offense. The Steelers barely used him on offense last year. He's a special teams player. And if in a pinch you need to put him at fullback to use that special teams ability to just run and hit somebody, yeah, he'll do that. But special teamer, that's what he is.
7th round pick, Mark Robinson, linebacker, Ole Miss. We're not going to spend long on him, but just give us a real quick inroad for him.
It's the same thing. If he can make some plays on as a special teamer in the preseason, there's a path to him for the roster. Right now, he's got an uphill battle, though. There are four middle linebackers on the Steelers that all played significant special team snaps last year. So he's got an uphill battle. But 3 of those 4 guys are are free agents after this upcoming year. So if the Steelers want to get out ahead of this thing and say, you know what, we're going to cut one of those 3 because we got this guy for 4 years guaranteed. That's the route for him. Otherwise, go on the practice squad for a year, let those guys, be experienced special team players, re-sign one in the offseason, let Robinson come up next year. I think that's the most likely path for him.
We could talk about this all night, but I think we're done with this video for now. Simon, tell everybody if they want to read some of your stuff, hear more of your stuff, tell everybody where they can find that at. Yeah,
so thank you again, Ben, so much for having me on here. I love doing this. So you guys, first off, can follow me on Twitter at Simon_Short. That has 2 T's on it. That's where I put all of my work. So my work is written on phantomsportsofficial.com. And it's also audio on my podcast, the Simon Short Podcast. Or you can come back to this channel and I post something weekly here. So come check us out.
And I can vouch for Simon's writing skills as well. He spends a lot of time looking up a lot of these details and studying these players. And it's not just an opinion-based article. It is very in-depth whenever he touches on a lot of this. So by all means, go over to Phantom Sports, check out Simon's writing. Simon, thank you very much, man.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, we'll see you next time on Sports and Money. Have a great one. Goodbye.